There is so much going on in the sky that a drive-by would not convey the complexity of what is unfolding on both a mundane and personal level. Before I commence with my interpretation of these dynamics, I'd like to emphasize that astrology is not a tool for divination, particularly since time is rapidly becoming nonlinear in our perception of reality. Nor do the planets directly control our lives. The ancients prescribed to the hermetic principles of as above, so below, and as within, so without. They knew that classifications of energetic signatures are very useful when attempting to navigate through the world in an effort to integrate and bring about cohesive consciousness. That's the same methodology I am using here for the same purpose. Astrology is a means by which we can understand archetypal energies and the recurring patterns as they present themselves celestially. These patterns can be observed, measured, annotated, and extrapolated to what is mirrored internally through our own energetic architecture as individuals and as a collective. If you haven't watched my video entitled Big Wheels, then I would recommend you view it as it presents a baseline that will help you understand what is happening now in the world and how it can be perceived from a big picture point of view. We are living through the fourth turning, and that video explains the terminology that was coined by two sociologists in their book by the same name. My approach as an astrologer, so that you understand what lens I'm looking through, is based on the traditional tropical zodiac with an emphasis on planetary heliacal cycles from transpersonal to personal and the effect of fixed star placements. If you've been following my channel since its inception, then you are already aware that we have shifted out of a 200-year-old Earth-based cycle into a 200-year-old air cycle. What does that mean in practical terms? Emphasis has moved from a material, kinetic, slow-moving reality to one that highlights everything to do with information, communication, and technology. In other words, Saturnian dominance is making way for mercurial movement. Things are speeding up. Conflicts are less physically oriented and more internet-based, the pen being mightier than the sword. Commerce, industry, and how we choose to exchange energy will be forever changed and will be expressed very rapidly in a configuration that will make most people whose belief systems are anchored in the old paradigm very nervous, upset, and potentially irrational as their worldview implodes before their very eyes. 2024 is the year of exposure. Everything that has been hidden, buried, repressed, or obscured will be revealed to the masses, whether they're ready to receive it or not. Why do I say this? Because Pluto entered Aquarius in March, and Neptune is retrograde as of July 2nd. Firstly, Aquarius is the sign of the people, as it opposes Leo, the sign of royalty. Pluto is the god of the underworld. He represents death and rebirth, as well as power in its rawest form. Let's rewind a bit so you grasp the flow of this process fully. For the first time in 248 years, Pluto entered Capricorn in 2008, and one of the most catastrophic financial crises occurred in America. The US is now undergoing a Pluto return as he retrogrades back into Capricorn for the last time in early September of this year to do a final sweep of authoritarian rule. Money markets will bear the brunt of this power shift. Inevitable collapse is already underway, as was made evident on June 9th, when the Saudis no longer supported the American petrodollar as reserve currency. The sun was squaring Saturn that day, a literal tug of war in the sky between the solar life-giving light and the Lord of Karma, representing the status quo. In addition, on June 11th of this year, Mars squared Pluto, and 2 days later, Russian subs were spotted near Cuba, echoing the same tension between these two planets in 1961 during the Bay of Pigs invasion under Kennedy's administration. Are you seeing the patterns now? The first week of July, Neptune, in his ruling sign of Pisces, started doing the backstroke. Neptune is the ruler of faith, dreams, illusions, and addictions. When he paddles in reverse, the fog is lifted, and we can better see the little man with the big voice hiding behind the curtains. Hence, the year of exposure. It is also important to keep in mind that we had a total solar eclipse in Aries on April 8th. As of today's date, all the personal planets have crossed and been marked by this same reboot point in their transits through Aries. The influence of this energy reverberates a year for every minute's duration of the actual event, and the eclipse was a little over 4 minutes long. Remember also, I mentioned in my drive-by report that Texas marks the hotspot in terms of intersecting trajectory paths, and I would venture to say that this state will be in the news for months to come as a catalytic trigger point in the ensuing American Revolution 2.0. The same will apply for France, which is undergoing its own Pluto return. Israel had the October eclipse path hitting its ascendant, so you can bet on a restructuring of some sort in this part of the world that was sparked on October 7th of last year and will likely culminate in October of this year with another annular eclipse happening on October 2nd, while Pluto is retrograding in Capricorn. So enjoy the summer, folks. When it comes to jockeying for position on the planetary level, it is undeniable that the wandering star with the most juice in 2024 is Mars. Why would I come to that conclusion? Several points to consider. Mars was in Gemini for 7 months, from August 20th, 22, all the way to March 25th, 2023. The god of war normally stays in a sign for 2 months on average, so this is a notable difference. I would go so far as to say it was establishing the narrative that is playing itself out right now, as it is galvanized by Mars entering Gemini again on July 20th, 2024. Gemini is a mutable air sign ruled by Mercury. Mars is hot and dry. It cuts away and separates, being the lesser malefic. Saturn is the greater malefic in a diurnal cycle, but it is retrograde in Pisces with Neptune, the ruler of that sign, dominating that watery realm. Therefore, division and severing is the prevailing theme, and since it plays out in the element of air, that means a war of words. The phrases emerging in our common vernacular that reflect this are misinformation, disinformation, fake news, cancel culture, conspiracy theories, shadow banning, etc. As above, so below. The next point to consider where heliacal phases are concerned is that Mars was the only planet left visible in the May morning sky this year when Venus, Mercury, Jupiter, and Saturn dropped below the horizon line to enter a new phase once they passed the combustion with the sun. That's right, I said it. The only planet visible to the naked eye in the sky was Mars. This, in turn, was followed by a 4-planet stellium in, you guessed it, Gemini on June the 4th. That's a lot of juice in the sign of the twins. Bear in mind, however, that both benefics, Jupiter and Venus, were not visible in the sky at this time. Saturn was reborn first in Pisces on April 22nd. Mars followed in May in his own sign of Aries. Here he trumps the greater malefic and has no competition or moderating influences to subdue his warrior archetype. He's unquestionably marking his territory in the sky for all to behold. Jupiter separated from the sun's beams in mid-June, right after the planetary parade. Venus birthed into evening star only recently, on July 9th, to cast her harmonic rays into the landscape once again in the sign of Leo. This constitutes a turn of energetics that justifies a separate video, but I'm hoping you're beginning to get a handle on how these dynamics are engineered. The whopper of all alignments in 2024, in my humble opinion, was the July 15th exact conjunction of Mars and Uranus in Taurus, right where the fixed star Algol is winking in the constellation of Perseus. There's a lot to unpack here, so bear with me. Uranus is a transpersonal planet and by definition impacts the collective as a whole by virtue of its long orbit around the sun of 84 years. The last time it was in this degree of Taurus was in 1941. We all know what happened then in history. Uranus is associated with sudden, shocking change, so I was betting some dramatic event was likely in that time frame. The proximity to Algol adds to the plot line, as this is also known as the demon star. It represents the head of Medusa, the Gorgon Perseus slew in Greek mythology, and is described in ancient texts as carrying a malevolent quality represented by a pile of corpses. As it turns out, on July 13th, there was an assassination attempt in the US. What needs to be taken into account is the fact that Algol is a binary star system with three faces: bright, dim, and eclipsed. Why does this matter? Well, just as Venus and Mercury have two presentations that are polarized in nature, a binary star can be protective or destructive depending on which face is visible. It is said that a person who was born with a significant Algol placement in their chart that is in its eclipsed phase is more prone to madness and mental disorder. Algol was in her bright phase during this conjunction, and some would say this may be a contributing factor to the outcome of the drama that unfolded on July 13th. There's one more point I'd like to make that hasn't been highlighted by any other astrologers I've watched regarding the July horoscope, and this conjunction in particular. Medusa was a beautiful woman who was punished by Aphrodite for having sexual relations with Neptune. She cursed her by making her a gorgon with snakes for hair. Ironically, Aphrodite was born from the white foam caused by Uranus's genitals being flung into the sea after Kronos, Saturn, castrated him. Most importantly, and tying into this archetypal patterning, is the fact that out of Medusa's decapitation, Pegasus was born. What does a winged horse have to do with life on Earth? To understand this, you need to have a clear awareness of the meaning of archetype. In my case, I refer specifically to the Jungian breakdown of 12 brands, but regardless of how you categorize them, an archetype has an identifiable energetic signature that distinguishes it from all the others. Removal of a head results in the liberation of a spirit, same as was the case with Salome and John the Baptist. To put it in the current context, over-rationalizing, emphasis on the intellect, reductive thinking, and Cartesian dualism has been our paradigm since the 1500s, and perhaps it is time to emancipate ourselves from this worldview. Allow Mars to cut us free from our self-imposed limitations and self-sabotaging ideas, embracing the warrior archetype, and taking a dramatic, catastrophic event and turning it into something remarkably beautiful. I'm recording and publishing this on the second full moon in Capricorn on July 21st. This lunation is at the anaretic degree just before a change of sign on the mother-father axis of Cancer in Capricorn. You have the perfect opportunity during this thunder moon to sever yourself from any toxic parental conditioning that made you dim your light and led you to believe that you were unworthy, unlovable, inadequate, less than who you truly are as a unique, authentic soul with an exclusive blueprint and roadmap to see you through this massive transformation of a species. This is the end of a 16-year cycle that began in 2008 when Pluto entered Capricorn. Wherever Capricorn falls in your chart, you will feel echoes of the challenges that presented in that time frame. As we move into Leo, see yourself whole and restored. able to shine your light without fear of judgment, criticism, and full of courage and purpose. Lose your head so you can tap into the fifth element. I will now add a feature to my astrological reports that will hopefully enhance your experience on this channel. Herbal allies that facilitate smooth transitions in challenging areas. There are plant correspondences to every planetary archetype. From a medical astrology outlook, the next few months will be impacting everyone's nervous system. Mercury is connected to this function, but putting you at ease is more in the Venusian domain. So I would recommend adding a few drops of vervain tincture into a glass of alkalized water to put your anxiety in check and bring you back into balance. You need to know that all the outer planets will be changing signs in 2025, bringing the elements of fire and air into the collective in a way that may manifest through radical change. It is my hope that we will learn from history, and by understanding the greater cycles, we will be able to utilize these opportunities to spiral up an octave with the least amount of suffering and resistance. Let go of what no longer serves and embrace the new matrix with an open heart and childlike enthusiasm. If you encounter an egregore of a low frequency that sparks fear, hatred, or polarization, do not engage with it and stay in a positive alignment, and it will lose its potency. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to my monthly podcast, the link of which will be posted in the description below. And if you feel so inclined, you can buy me a coffee on my website, also listed below. Until we meet again, I pray that we can all bear witness to this monumental shift into an Aquarian age from a place of peace and prosperity.